People often come to their charts looking for the cure or the fix to their pain, illness, or anxiety. Like maybe it's a sixth house thing, or it's their Chiron or Saturn. But honestly, there isn't a single placement that guarantees illness or struggle. It's simply not that neat. What matters more is how we live the chart, how we meet the energies through our bodies, through our choices, and what we've learned to suppress or override growing up. Astrology and human design can show where the tension may live, but illness and pain themselves are the language of reconnection. They call us back to the body, to the parts of ourselves that we've abandoned in order to survive. And when we start to actually listen to this, to listen to the body, instead of trying to fix or transcend it, that's when healing really begins. While the charts are great tools for helping us see the underlying energetic patterns or the roots of our patterns, the work is for us to do. And any desire to override that will simply keep us in the same patterns that our body and soul are trying to get us to see. So, in this video, we'll talk about my perspectives, but I'll also give practical tips on how to start the reconnection with the body, whether that's, a difficult relationship that's happened through trauma or pain, illness, exhaustion, anxiety, or any other uncomfortable sensation in our bodies. In future videos, I will go deeper into the areas of our charts that typically do show up in illness. But for now, it's important to understand and to speak on my perspectives and how I approach all of that from, because that really is the foundation of my work and how I approach everything. This is a big topic for me, which is why I've started this series, Illness as Initiation, and why I will continue to talk about it because, as I mentioned in my previous video, pain is not something that we're taught how to deal with. And so many of us struggle with understanding how to connect to our pain. And, so many people come to me in my one on one sessions and say, but Jazz, I've been in therapy. I felt my pain so much. I feel it all the time. But here's the thing, we often do one of two things with our pain. We either suppress it or we react from it. And there's a bonus third one of repression, which I'll get into a little bit, slightly different than suppression. But neither of those are truly sitting with the pain. And so the suppression often shows up as we feel something come up, a sensation in our bodies, and we suppress it either through avoidance or pretending it's not there or dissociating, which is a very common thing. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Maybe we'll just act like it's not there. I know for me, when I had my chronic pain, I spent a good portion of that chronic pain just like pretending it's not there. Like obviously it was there, but just pretending and living my life as though it were not there because it was like, well, I'm not going to let this thing run my life. That didn't really work. And then the second thing that we often see is that we react from the pain. And for me, this looked like for like the second half of my chronic pain, it was like me reacting from the pain, therefore, meaning that I stopped doing a lot of things because I kind of let the pain control me. Or for you, it might be even if it's not pain or it's emotional pain, reacting from that emotional pain. So, for example, you're angry and you react with anger. You yell, you scream. This is one of the things that people will go to these places and like take their anger out. What is it like where they like throw things and like break things? And actually, a lot of science shows this is not helpful. And I think once in a while it's fine, but if we associate our anger with breaking things, I'm not sure that's a super healthy way of going about it, but unfortunately it's a way that many of us were parented, right? We witnessed our parents getting angry and resorting to violence, whether that's like hitting us or spanking us or whatever, and so we kind of associate those two things, but there is a third way, and it's not this third way, which is repression. And repression is a little bit different than suppression because repression occurs when we unconsciously suppress. So suppression is more like I feel the anger coming up and I'm not going to deal with it. Repression is often a survival mechanism that started while we were more unconscious. So, as a child, and this is the unconscious mechanism of keeping us safe. So, this is actually a very common thing in people who have autoimmune disorders, in which the energetic root of that oftentimes is anger. And when I meet with them, or other people I know who work with autoimmune patients meet with them, and we tell them this, and they're like, "Oh, but Jazz, I'm not angry." And it's like, yeah, no, I know. I know you don't consciously feel that. That's why the body is having to show it because you are not feeling that because that was a protective mechanism. So that's kind of the difference there. And this is why honestly working with people who have autoimmune illnesses takes time because the pain that created these problems lies in the unconscious. So it takes longer for us to understand them, to see them, to witness them, and to reintegrate them into our lives. So if you don't know what you're conscious about, or if you don't know what you're angry about, I'm just using anger, but it could be sadness, like all these different things. If you don't know consciously, then we have to do some work together, which is why I love using things like astrology, human design. I've talked about that in the past, about how they help in that process, and of course shadow work, and of course the reason we're here today, which is the body. The body is our greatest tool for reconnection, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first I want to talk about how is it that we can feel our pain by being in it and not reacting and not suppressing. I was talking to one of my amazing clients recently about this, and we were talking about crying. And I told her that for most of my life, especially as an adult, I was the person who cried all the time. Like anything would just tip me over into crying. My partner and I have been together for 8.5 years, and for the first 7.5 years, he knew me as somebody who constantly cried. And what I realized about that, actually, an astrologer pointed out to me over a decade ago. And she was kind of like one of those more like aggressive astrologers, you know what I'm talking about, where you're like, I don't know if you have people skills. You have great analysis skills, but the people skills are a little bit missing there. But I remember she made me cry on our call, and when I was crying, she told me, she's like, "You're crying, but you're not feeling anything." And in that moment, I was like, "What? Like, what does that even mean?" And to this day, I don't know exactly what she meant, but my conjecture is that I was moving from that reaction, right? The emotion was coming up, and I was naturally just releasing it because my capacity to hold it was so low, right? So I had a cup, and it was filled to the brim with water, and any little thing that would be added to that cup of emotion, it would spill over, and I needed to release it somehow, right? Like it needed to be to let off some pressure. And so I would cry and I would feel better, and I would go back to equilibrium, which was a cup that was filled with water to the very brim. And nowadays I rarely cry. And what's ended up happening is not that I am now avoidant, because this is often a lot of people who have always been like this, who have never cried and haven't done the work, are generally just avoidant of it. But for me, it's kind of one of the things that I always saw in Buddhists that I really loved, but I never understood, was how they were able to um, have so much love and compassion, but also be kind of stoic in that. And now I realize that through the type of meditation that I've done, I have I have created a bigger cup. So the pain is not lessened, but there's a bigger cup to hold more of it before it needs to spill over. And so this is what this work is here to do. When we learn to sit with our pain, we increase the size of our cup to be able to hold more of it without it having to run over, without it having to affect us to the point where we are immobile. Often, a lot of people who come to me have done all this healing, but they still haven't learned how to sit with their pain. And this is just a new paradigm of healing that I believe we're moving into that's going to be very helpful. And human design and astrology and tarot can be our assistants, but they're not our shortcuts. right? If there was a way to see it in the charts, I still wouldn't think that that's the best way to go about it, because you're bypassing connection. And connection is the most important aspect of humanity. Many of us have forgotten that because we've been in such a long state of disconnection, or in the state of functional freeze where our lives look okay on the outside, but we're connecting to everything from a disconnected place. And that's something that I would love to talk more about in a later video, because there's a lot of richness there as well. So, one of the ways that I practice witnessing and sitting with my pain is through meditation. And for many years, over 10 years, I could not meditate. And I'm a Gemini Sun, Sagittarius Moon. Like, these are not placements that you would naturally associate with someone who likes to meditate. And for so many years, I struggled with this, because the way that meditation was told to me was like it's a way to quiet the mind. And so I was always trying to quiet the mind. But now I realize how silly that is, because our mind is just an organ. And how much time do we spend trying to control our kidney or our liver? We don't. And so it's not about controlling the mind, it's about letting the mind do what it does, but instead using meditation to expand our cup, to expand our container, to increase our capacity. And this is what I work with with my clients in our one-on-one sessions. And over time, this is something that's done. We have to do it with consistency. We have to be devoted to this type of work in order for us to really see the fruits of our labor. So how do we actually reconnect? Okay, like, how do we actually start this process? How do we hear what the body is trying to say without suppressing it or reacting? Um, it starts with staying. Yes, I know, easier said than done. But not trying to change the sensations in our body, not analyzing them, not escaping into the stories, which is what my last illnesses initiation video was about. Was how we have these stories around pain that keep us stuck in that mindset. And just noticing what's happening right now. So, I have this framework called PACE: pause, alchemize, connect, embody. This is what I taught in my Turning Triggers into Gold workshop, which is still available for the replay and the workbook and all of that. But really, it's same principle that I'm going to talk about right now, which is to just locate the pain in the body and describe it. Is it dull? Is it heavy? Is it hot, buzzing, cold? And the body, the body uses language, or the body's language is sensation. So oftentimes we do hear words, sometimes we do hear it talk back, but a lot of times, especially in the beginning, it's just heat or buzzing or openness or tension. The third thing is breathe into it. And asking it if this is what it wants, and giving it space to exist, not breathing into it necessarily to just get rid of it, but allowing it more space to get there. And so much of the somatic work, it's so easy to like watch a YouTube video and they tell you, oh, do these things for somatics, but building connection is not static, right? So in the beginning, it's super helpful to be like, yes, okay, we do these things, but eventually connection becomes a two-sided conversation rather than, you just doing the same thing again and again. And then, the fourth thing is listen without fixing. Asking it like, what are you trying to show me? What do you need to tell me? Sometimes the answer won't come in words, sometimes it won't come at all. And you say, okay, maybe there's been and I mean, I can say this with almost certainty. I don't like to say always and all, complete certainty, that there's been severed trust. And when severed trust occurs, sometimes people or those parts of you don't want to connect right now. And so we have to allow that. This is why, once again, this is a process. It takes time, and devotion is really what it's about. But each step, with what I just told you and with my PACE framework, trains you to create enough space in your system to receive the body's message, instead of reacting to the pain, the exhaustion, the anxiety that's coming through. Over time, you start really recognizing that pain isn't asking for punishment. It's asking for relationship. And I want to just give a little bit of time to talk about some of the reasons why this framework doesn't work. And as you guys know, I talk openly about my chronic pain journey. I had it for 10 years. I had multiple autoimmune illnesses for 3 years, multiple, I had PCOS, endometriosis, Lyme disease, so many different things. But those are just part of the things. But I know from that experience that sometimes it's just not as easy to be like, oh, I got to sit with this because it's excruciating, or the exhaustion is so bad, or the anxiety is so bad. And so when that happens, it's hard because it's like to talk about it here, but there are excitable factors that we have to account for sometimes and make some adjustments in real time in order for us to be able to sit with it. So that's definitely a part of the process as well, and a really important one you're like, well, it's too bad I can't sit with it. Um, but once again, this is exactly why this is not easy or quick work. You disconnect from the body for 30 years, it's not going to be like this. And many of us, like me, I was on this journey for 15 years, spent over $100,000 minimum on this journey. So it's like we do the work and then we get to this point, we're changing our diets, we're going to this person, we're going getting massage. All of these things can absolutely be super helpful. But once we get to this work and it's like, oh wow, this is where like the underpinning of this really is, and then it creates um, yeah, we need to put in effort in a different way. For many of us, disconnection from the body isn't something that just happened overnight. Like I mentioned, it's generally from when we were children, when we learned that it was safer not to feel. So maybe it was too much at once. This is often what trauma is defined as. Or we had to leave the body to be safe for some reason. And maybe even we felt so uncomfortable in our bodies that we had to move to things like self harm. And so there was like a deep hatred of the body itself in some ways, and like been there, done that. I don't talk about all of my struggles, but that is one of the things that I struggled with for much of my life, not even just as childhood, or just as a child. As an immigrant moving here when I was really young, I hated how different I looked from everybody, and that led to a lot of unhealthy behaviors towards my body. So, even maybe we were praised for being strong or productive or quiet instead of deeply present and authentic. And so our bodies became the place that we left rather than the place we lived in order to maintain safety. So that's what dissociation that I mentioned earlier really is. It's always been protection. Like sometimes we go into the body and we don't feel anything. And that's so normal. If we've been in a state of dissociation for so long, there's numbness. Our system at one point decided it's too much to feel this right now. And if that was a repetitive thing that happened in our lives, now that's the primary state that we live in. So there's so many different layers to this, and that's why it's so rich to work with the body, because there really is, like, we get into astrology and human design and we're like, wow, there's so much to learn here, and it's so true. And also, like, when we take the time to turn inward, there's almost also so much there too, and that is unique to you. Reconnecting the body is rewiring how we stay protected and feel fully alive. And so there's a depth of wisdom there that can never really be fully revealed in your charts, right? The charts show possibilities, but the wisdom within you is what brings that chart alive. And this is why I often tell my clients, especially in our first session, which is more of like a discovery time, right? Obviously, you're going to learn a lot from my perspective of your charts, but it's really a discovery period. And I tell people, like, I want you to engage, because your stories are more unique to you than your chart is, you know? Um, so yeah, so why is the connection to the body so important here? Really, like, why is it so important? Because the part of us that never leaves the present moment is the body. The mind is, future, present, past, everywhere. It's there, mental anxiety, worry, all these things. But the body is just here. And it's not living in those stories, or the roles that we've been told that we have to play. It's just existing in this moment. And so when we learn to meet our pain, our illness, our anxiety, instead of fighting it or even fixing it or trying to get rid of it, what we're really doing is reclaiming that relationship with the part of us that's always been true to this moment. Body truly does not lie to us. It doesn't act, it doesn't care who is watching or what role is being asked of us. It just says, hey, something here needs your attention. And when we start to finally listen to that, we stop trying to be the person that we think we should be, and we start remembering who we actually are. That's why this process is not about healing symptoms. I understand why people think that it's about that, but it's not about that. It's about remembering your true self, part of you that the charts lead to but can never fully reveal. Every moment you choose to have the presence in the body over trying to survive in and live in the stories that you've created, when you choose feeling over numbing, when you choose love over control, you return a little bit closer to that truth that is you. Thank you so much for joining me today. I love doing these videos and having these discussions. I'd love to know down in the comments below, what was one part of this video that really stuck out to you? What's one thing that you want to take with you moving forward, even if it's just for today or this week? Is it the practice? Is it something I said? Maybe, try listening to this video again. Most of my clients watch their readings 3 to 5 times because there is richness there, right? And our minds can only process so much information at any given time. Sometimes you listen to it and you get one thing, and then you listen to it and you get another. And I just invite you to feel free to do that if you need to. Thanks again for being here, and I'll see you next time.